Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Peace United Church of Christ, where no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. Darcy, that was beautiful.
Our first reading this morning is from the Old Testament book of Genesis 12, 1 through 9. Now the Holy One said to Abraham, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Abram went as the Holy One had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Abram took his wife Sarai and his brother's son Lot, and all the possessions that they had gathered, and all the people whom they had acquired in Haran. And they set forth to go to the land of Canaan. When they had come to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Holy One appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So Abram built there an altar to the Holy One who had appeared to him. But there he moved on to the hill country on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there Abram built an altar to the Holy One and invoked the name of the Holy One. And Abram journeyed on by stages toward Negev. Our second reading today is an unnamed poem by James Broughton. Not dwelling, not doubting, intrepid all the way, walk toward clarity with sharp eye. With sharpened sword, clear cut the path to the lucent surprise of enlightenment. At every crossroad, be prepared to bump into wonder. For the wisdom contained in these holy words, we give thanks. Amen.
I was going to say, "It is well with my soul." It's one of my favorite hymns. I'll just say that. It's one of my favorite hymns. Have compassion for everyone you meet, even if they don't want it. What seems conceit, bad manners, or cynicism is always a sign of things no ears have heard, no eyes have seen. You don't know what wars are going on down where the spirit meets the bone. Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. The history of humanity begins badly. After a dramatic creation story, the story of the world and the people in it is rather disappointing. That's an understatement. Eviction from a beautiful garden, murder, a flood, and a bungled tower building project all occur in the first 11 chapters of Genesis. All happen because of people's fear and greed. Which brings us to the text this morning. It's almost as if God threw up God's hands and said, "Let's give this one more try. This time, let me focus on one person who can change the world for the better." God chose Abram. I'm not sure why God chose Abram. We'll find out in the next couple of weeks. Maybe not such a good choice. But anyway, let's keep going with our story. Now the Holy One said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. all the families of the earth. So Abram went, as the Holy One had told him. Abram was 75 years old. So I'm just going to say, no excuses. Just like that, Abram packed his bags and the bags of his household and went to God only knew where. God commanded Abram to leave country and family, to leave a safe and comfortable life, and go to a place radically different than what Abram knew. God wanted Abram to push aside status quo. God commanded Abram to leave a safe and comfortable life, give up everything he could carry, give everything up except what he could carry, and go to a place unknown. God wanted Abram to leave behind the attachment to security and settledness. God wanted Abram to abandon complacency. God commanded Abram to leave a safe place and a comfortable life, give up everything except what he could carry, and go to a place unknown with the promise that Abram would become a great nation, as many as the stars in the sky, though he and Sarai had no children, and they were too old to have them. The promise given by God also said that in Abram, all families of the earth would be blessed. God wanted Abram to trust in something that seemed impossible. God commanded Abram to push aside status quo, abandon complacency, and trust in the seemingly impossible, namely that Abram would become a great nation, and through him all families on the earth would be blessed. And Abram went. What does it mean? Well, let's start with some definitions. Let's start with pushing aside status quo. Status quo, what things are like now. It is the existing state of affairs, the way of life as a person knows it. We hear it in phrases like, we've always done it like that, or that's the way of the world. We experience it through systems and structures that are created within which communities live. Experience it through tradition, through rules, both explicit and implicit. Status quo experience today is for some okay. For some, status quo is way better than okay. For some, it's death-making. In the story, God told Abram to push aside status quo. The way of the world was not how God wanted it to be. There needed to be a change, and God chose Abram to be the change maker. Abram needed to leave behind the way things were so that what could be had room to thrive. For us living in the world today, to push status quo aside means to dismantle systems, structures, traditions, and rules that are inequitable, oppressive, and death-making. It requires us to change our minds about the way things are, to leave behind the way things are, so that what can be has room to thrive, just like Abram did all those years ago. I'm not going to list the things we can do. You know what I'm talking about. We do them every day. Let's move on to abandoning complacency. Complacency and status quo are two peas in a pod. Complacency is the feeling of being satisfied with how things are, that's status quo, and not wanting to try to make them better. Abandoning a satisfied way of living to try and make things better, that's a hard thing to do, hard thing to think about if you're doing okay. It's risky. Who knows how things will end if you shake it up? When we've got a good life, when we know how the game is played, when we are surrounded by people like us who like us, when we finally made it, whatever it is, you get the idea. It's tempting to sit down and pat ourselves on the back. We've made it, we might think. Let others work hard for their own secure and settled existence. We have enough. We are satisfied. Amen. God wasn't satisfied, though, with the way things were. God told Abram to leave it all behind, to abandon the security of his life and move somewhere unknown, to step outside his comfort zone and make some changes. I don't suppose it made any sense then. I can just imagine the conversation Abram had with his dad. And I wonder what the neighbors thought when Abram was picking up and moving on down the road with all the things he could carry. Now, I don't suppose it made any sense then, and I am certain it doesn't make any sense now. And yet, that's the story. That's the story in our sacred text. That's the story in our sacred text that we claim guides our way of being in the world. God told Abram to leave his country and his family, to give up what he knew for what? For a promise of blessing. Blessing. To be blessed means to be fully satisfied, to be made holy or sacred. It suggests abundance and well-being. Think about that for a minute. God's promise was for Abram to realize his sacredness, that he was created in the image of God, a precious child of God, just as he was. God's promise was one of abundance. Not only would Abram's family multiply like the stars in the sky, but they would also have land, which in the context of this story's telling would have meant having enough to thrive. And here's the thing. Here's the amazing, radical thing. Not only would Abram be blessed, so would all the families of the earth. All people. Everyone would be recognized as being created in God's image, precious children of God, and everyone would have enough to thrive, would experience abundance. That sounds a lot like comprehensive well-being to me, doesn't it? Did it seem impossible? Yes. First of all, Abram's wife Sarai was well beyond childbearing age. Later on in the text, we hear Sarah's laughter when God says she will have a child. How could this family multiply like the stars in the sky? Impossible. And even if Sarai was young enough to have a child, how could it be that one person, by packing his bags and getting out of town, could change the world? Although our young people understand that clearly. And why would he want to do it anyway? He was established, his family was established right where they were. What's wrong with status quo? And why shouldn't he sit back and enjoy what he'd made for himself? Some might call it complacency. He might have called it relaxing. Yet in 3 words, the storyteller creates the opportunity for the impossible to become possible. 3 words. So, Abram went. We've heard this story before, some of us many times. Each time I hear it, I am amazed when I come to the last 3 words that will change the world. I have goosebumps. As the poet says, I bump into wonder. Here's the thing. The wonder in this story, told in Genesis, did not end with Abram. Joseph, with his coat of many colors, was hauled off to Egypt and ended up an advisor to Pharaoh. Saved the people, bumped into wonder. Moses landed in a basket in a river, then across the sea, went into the wilderness and climbed a mountain, had a little talk with God, and brought down 10 commandments. Bumped into wonder. Esther, a young Jewish woman, married a king, took a chance and saved her people. Jonah landed in a whale, and then in Nineveh, where the whole city, including all the animals, turned toward God. Talk about bumping into wonder. Jesus left home, traveled the countryside, an itinerant storyteller lifting up the abundance of God's kingdom and the sacredness of all humanity, marched into Jerusalem, turned over some tables, and was hung from a tree. Rose again 3 days later, bumping into wonder again and again and again. The story is still not over. Let's speed ahead just a little bit. In 1920, on a corner in the state, in the middle of the country, a people joined together and called themselves Evangelical Church of Webster Groves. Twice they decided to give money they had raised specifically to build a church home Twice they gave that money, once to Eden Theological Seminary and once to Deaconess Hospital when those organizations needed it. Years later, though it was risky, they pushed aside status quo, abandoned complacency, and publicly opened their arms wide to include people marginalized and killed for who they were and who they loved. Killed and still killed by a country who calls itself Christian. This congregation chooses to love and recognize these sacred, precious children of God. Bumps right into wonder. The same people now calling themselves Peace United Church of Christ finds numerous ways to join God's work in the world. For example, we welcome children, some of the most vulnerable people in our society, into our midst to learn to read and find their voices and change the world through Children's Defense Fund Freedom School and Sprouts of Peace and regular weekly times together, bumping into wonder along the way. Just a year ago, this community of faith made the decision to sell our beloved property to live more fully into our mission. Wonder. Still not done. The same community steps out today to do what many would say is impossible. We are working to create affordable housing for the elders in our community who are most vulnerable. Wonderful. Does it seem impossible to push aside status quo and abandon complacency? Change the world? Yes. Does the promise of abundance and recognition of all humanity's sacredness seem impossible? Yes. Is it? I don't think so. And don't you want to find out? God says go. So we go. And as we go, let us be prepared to bump into wonder at every step of our journey. So we go. 3 words that can change the